Okay, so today what we'd like to do is go over this problem set for chapter five, that is, which is about nominal and real GDP. And then the second one, we're basically trying to calculate GDP based on the data that we're given. All right, so let's take a look at this. Let me just get one thing out before we get started. And when we're done with this, we'll get back to six. We were looking at unemployment and how it's calculated. I'm not sure if I have any videos for that. Let me just double check before I completely forget. There might be one. It's always fun to have videos, especially these. Some of them are so well done, so I just don't want to miss them. All right, let's see. And log in. Unemployment, there it is. So those two videos, we can watch those today because that's what we're in right now. Chapter 6 is the unemployment discussion, but first we need to look at 5. And then we have to calculate 4 things: nominal and real GDP for both years. So let's get started. So the important thing to remember here is that, oh, by the way, it does say here that 2019 is the base year. That's an important piece of information because that means that all the real GDP values will be calculated based on 2019 prices. Okay, so we'll start with 2019 nominal GDP. So what are we doing here? Equals. All right, so here's what you're doing. You're multiplying for each good that we produce, which in this case is coffee and milk. We're going to multiply how many units we produced in 2019 times the price. In other words, it'll be 2019 price of coffee times 2019 quantity of coffee plus the 2020 price of coffee. I'm sorry, what am I saying? 2019 price of milk times the 2019 quantity of milk. So that's the basic logic. That's going to be true for any year. The nominal GDP means you're multiplying that current year's quantities by the current year prices. And that means that there's no adjustment for inflation. This is what you're actually observing in the real world right now. And so if you multiply those out, you'll see that the coffee is $8, the quantity is 2,000, plus 2 times 5,000. So you've got 16,000 plus 10,000, which is 26,000. Okay, so that's that. Now B, that's it. Whoops, I forgot to label this. This is A. Oh, also one more thing. I want to save this real fast. By the way, did you notice today's October 1st? Man, how time is flying. All right, so whoops. Anyway, so let's do this for real GDP. Now, again, this is assuming that 2019 is the base year. So what I'm going to do is write it like this. 2019 real GDP would be the base year price of coffee times the 2019 quantity of coffee plus the base year price of milk times the 2019 quantity of milk. But because 2019 is the base year, we can rewrite this as 2019 price of coffee times 2019 quantity coffee plus 2019 price of milk times the 2019 quantity of milk. And you know what that means? This is exactly the same as what we had up here. So in other words, in the base year, we always find that, and I'll make a note of that here, in the base year, real GDP equals nominal GDP. So for that 1 year, you really don't have to do the calculations twice. It's understood that you're going to wind up with the same numbers because it is the base year. Now, with all that being said, in 2020, that will no longer be the case because in 2020, we're not in the base year. So how do we do that? The nominal GDP for 2020, now I'm going to have to split the screen so we can see the table. Yeah, that's better. All right, so the logic is exactly the same. Nominal is always current year prices and current year quantities. So 2020 nominal GDP equals 2020 price of coffee times 2020 quantity of coffee plus the 2020 price of milk times the 2020 quantity of milk. So again, you notice when we're dealing with the nominal GDP, everything is in the same year. All right. So that would give us in that case, we would have, if we read over here, the 2020 price of milk, coffee rather, is $9. And the quantity has gone up from 2,000 to 2,500. Then for the milk, the price has gone up to $2.20 a gallon, but the quantity has also gone up. All right, and if you multiply those out, let's see, let me get a little calculator here. All right, hold on one second. I'll get out the calculator. 9 times 2,500 is 22,500. And then 220 times 5,500 is 12,100. So the grand total of the two is 34,600. Okay. Now, if you notice, the previous year it was 26,000. So it's gone up quite a bit, but the problem is that with nominal GDP, we don't know how much of that is due to higher prices and how much of that is due to higher quantities. And it's the quantities that really matter to our standards of living. So that's why we want to do now the base of the real and again, it's base year price of coffee times 2020 quantity of coffee plus base year price of milk times 2020 quantity of milk. This what we're seeing here is correct, but because we were told that 2019 is the base year, we can now rewrite this as 2019 price of coffee times 2020 quantity of coffee, and this is the tricky part, plus 2019 price of milk times 2020 quantity of milk. All right. So in 2019 price of coffee, we go back into the chart and we see $8. And that's multiplied by the 2020 quantity of coffee, which is 2,500. And then for the milk, the 2019 price was 2, but the quantity in 2020 is 5,500. All right, so that's 20,000 plus 11,000, which is 31,000. Okay. Now, what we want to read into this is that, in fact, you know what we could do? We could summarize these very quickly and easily. Okay, and then we have 2020 nominal GDP is 31,000, and 2020 real GDP is 31,000. So you can see that, oh, no, it's not. What did I do? Sorry, this one is 34,600. All right. So I just want to point out that nominal GDP has increased by, and this, it doesn't ask you to do this, by the way. I just want you to see this. All right, so the percentage increase in nominal is, let's see. Hold on one second. About 33%, which sounds like a lot. But when you adjust for the prices, then you're going to find out how much actual output is increased. Okay, so the actual output, or real GDP, went up from 26 to only 31,000. And that's equal to approximately 19.23%. All right, so what that basically means then is that the inflation rate in 2020 was approximately 3.08% minus 19.23%. The difference between those two, whoops, hold on. %13.85%. All right, so in other words, the actual growth in the economy was 19.23%. The reason why nominal GDP went up by 33.08% is because output went up by 19.23%, but prices went up by about 13.85%. So our standards of living are growing quickly, but not as quickly as it appears from nominal GDP. So this is why real GDP is so important, because it gives us a better feel for how much our output is really growing, and therefore our standards of living. The nominal doesn't tell us a whole lot, because we can't be sure how much of this is inflation and how much of this is an actual increase in output. So this is why anytime you read anything on the internet, let's say you go to, I don't know, let's try any random source, or even Fred. Well, Fred will have both nominal and real. But if you look at, let's say, CNBC.com, and you'll see, and you're looking for articles about the economy, let's say a search here, you're never going to find an article about nominal GDP. It just isn't important enough. It's real GDP that really matters. All right, and so you'll look and you'll say, oh yeah, here it is. Well, all right, it's hard to tell from that, but yes, that's exactly right. It'll always be real GDP, even if they don't specifically mention it. You can be pretty confident they're talking about real GDP. There it is. And this is Asia, of course. And so, but anyway, because that's the number that really matters to policymakers and to investors as well. All right, so anytime you're asked to calculate either nominal or real GDP, you'll do exactly the same thing as you did here. It never changes. Nominal, remember, always uses current prices and current quantities. Real uses current quantities, but base year prices, and that's the big difference between them. All right, in fact, let me summarize that right here. Both nominal and real use current quantities, but nominal GDP uses current prices. Real GDP uses base year prices. That's the difference. Okay, so let's remember that. All right, good. Now this one is very straightforward. You've got a bunch of data here, but it says here to use, let's see, let me move this down to the next page. What you're being asked to do is calculate GDP, but in a different way. You're given the numbers that the government statistical agencies have gathered, and it says here that you're supposed to use the expenditures approach, which means Y equals C plus I plus G plus NX, okay? So in other words, you can ignore some of these. Like for example, this is C right here. So I'll use this one. Investment is here. Government is here. It's expenditures on goods and services. And net exports are here. Now you can ignore the others because they overlap with each other. In other words, rent is going to be incorporated into one of these categories. Profit, depreciation, it's just a different way of looking at GDP. So your final result would be to simply have 4,000 plus 600 plus 1,000 minus 500, and that equals 5,100. That's it. You're done. Now, if it had asked for the incomes approach, well, we did cover that once, but I think we'll kind of steer around that one just because it is kind of a mess. It's very complicated. Going forward, I think we'll just focus exclusively on this expenditures approach because it's just more straightforward. The other one has its benefits, but for the most part, this is what we really need. And if you notice, I just want to point out the trade deficit 500, which is what this is, has reduced GDP by 500. In other words, the GDP is lower than it would have been, except that we bought more products from abroad than we sold to foreigners. So in other words, some of our spending actually went to foreigners, not to American companies. And so therefore, they do not get counted in GDP. And in fact, they reduced it. Okay, so yeah, this is the one component of GDP that can be negative. The others have to be positive. Okay, so, all right, well, that was pretty straightforward, I think. So I'll be posting this on Moodle as usual. And now, I think what we can do next, since we've already been talking about unemployment, why don't we take a peek at these videos, and then we can get back into the chapter. Now, remember, we're talking about unemployment here, and we know that unemployment is very, very difficult to calculate properly. And so these videos will help us understand how and why that is. All right. Okay, let's see what's going on here.
Hey, Internet.
Yes, it's him. He's back. All right, here it is. Let me send you the link in the chat. All right, so let's do this. So I'll pause the sharing and then let's watch it.
This is Jacob Clifford, and welcome to my YouTube channel. The U.S. saw a record-breaking spike in unemployment in 2020. Actually, unemployment was higher back in the 1930s during the Great Depression, but back then it took 2 years for unemployment to get around 15%. In 2020, it took 2 months. And the new numbers just came out last week, so now the unemployment rate is 8.4%. That's better, but is it good? And how is unemployment measured? Well, it's time to find out. In the U.S., crunching the unemployment rate numbers is the job of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS. The first Friday of every month, they post the numbers and issue a report. Now, you can call me an econ geek, but that report is super interesting and includes a lot of the stuff you need to know to pass an econ class. So like I said, the unemployment rate in August of 2020 fell to 8.4%. In other words, things are getting better, but they're not good. The equation for the unemployment rate is the number of people who are unemployed divided by the number of people in the labor force times 100. In your class, you got to feel comfortable calculating the unemployment rate, but there's a bunch of other things that you got to know. The first thing is that not everyone without a job counts as unemployed. The unemployment numbers only look at people who are actively looking for work. So if you stop looking for a job, or if you don't even want a job, you're not considered unemployed because you're not part of the labor force. The labor force is the number of people that are actively looking for a job or have a job. So the unemployed and the employed, they're at least 16 years old, not institutionalized, in other words, not in jail or in a mental hospital, and not in the military. And the labor force participation rate is the number of people in the labor force divided by the working age population times 100. Now, I know I covered that really quick, so here's a recap and a visual. The total population includes everyone, including little kids and super old people that just can't work. When you take them out, you get the working age population, but that includes people who don't want a job, like full-time students or stay-at-home moms. And when you take them out, you end up with the labor force and the labor force participation rate. And it's inside the labor force that you see the number of people who are actively looking for a job, but they don't have one, and that gives you the unemployment rate. And of course, that unemployment rate can go up or down, and that shows you what's happening in the overall economy. Simple, but there's still a couple of problems. The first one is that part-time workers are considered fully employed. So if you have a job working 40 hours a week and that gets cut down to only 10 hours a week, you're still considered fully employed and you're not unemployed, even if you're looking for another job to make ends meet. The BLS actually tracks all this stuff. But the point is, if people are moved involuntarily to part-time work and they're underemployed, that still doesn't affect the official unemployment numbers. And the second issue is when people stop looking for a job.
I can't do this anymore, man. My head's about to explode.
These individuals are called discouraged workers, and they're no longer considered unemployed because they left the labor force. So if a chunk of people leave the labor force because they're so frustrated, they're so angry, they can't get a job, that'll actually cause the unemployment rate to fall. And that would actually make the economy look like it's doing better, even though it's totally not. Again, the BLS tracks all this, but it's something to keep in mind. The official unemployment rate is good, it's important, but you have to actually look at the numbers to figure out what's happening in the real economy.
Got it?
Kind of.
In the beginning, I mentioned that this spike in unemployment was record-breaking, but this was too. Before the pandemic, the US had the lowest unemployment rate since the 1950s. But notice, it didn't get down to 0%. Economists focus on three types of unemployment, and two of them always exist, even when the economy is doing great. The first type is frictional unemployment. That's temporary unemployment, like when people switch jobs when they first enter the labor force.
Did you hear I finally graduated?
Yeah, just a shade under a decade, too. All right.
You know, a lot of people go to college for 7 years.
I know. They're called doctors.
This type's always going to exist because people are going to be leaving their jobs and switching their jobs. But remember, this is temporary. The second type is structural unemployment, and that's long-term unemployment because workers don't have the right skills. Technological improvements make some jobs obsolete, and that causes structural unemployment. Sometimes a robot just does it better. Again, these two types of unemployment always exist, and together they make up the natural rate of unemployment. This is the amount of unemployment that exists even when the economy is doing great. So when we have frictional and structural unemployment, we're at full employment. Now that's actually a little different for every country, but in the US, the natural rate of unemployment is somewhere between 4 and 6%. So what's happening here when we're above 6%? Well, that's the third type of unemployment, cyclical unemployment. This is the result of a downturn in the economy. Workers aren't losing their jobs because they're between jobs or because machines do it better. They're losing their job because of a recession. During the pandemic, people couldn't go out to eat, so restaurant owners had to lay off their servers and their cooks, and that caused a spike in unemployment. That's cyclical unemployment. Now, I've got something that's going to help you remember this idea of frictional and structural and cyclical unemployment. A quick search on the internet will show you there's kind of an unofficial icon or symbol of 2020. It's a dumpster fire, and to help you remember these concepts, I have for you a dumpster. Unemployment is like a dumpster. It's just a fact of life. It's ugly, and it's always there. Sometimes people are going to get canned. So having a dumpster around, like frictional and structural unemployment, it's totally normal. It's natural. But a dumpster fire, that's something different. And that's what we have here in 2020, cyclical unemployment. But don't go anywhere. There's still two things we have to do. Number one, if you like this video, if I'm helping you learn and love economics, please subscribe and hit that like button. Also, be sure to hit that notification bell so you can see all the new videos I'm making for you this semester. And the second thing we have to do, it's time for a pop quiz. At the end of these videos, I put a few practice multiple choice questions to make sure you're actually getting it. Also, if you need more help, take a look at my ultimate review packet. It has a practice sheet. It's going to help you make sure you can do the calculations for unemployment, labor force participation rate, and all that stuff. The link is in the description below, and the best part, it's free to start, right now. Good luck on these practice questions. Make sure to look in the comments below for the right answers. Thanks for watching my videos. Until next time.
Okay, are we done? Well, I like that one. It really was very helpful. It reinforced some of the things we've already seen, and it talked about some things we haven't talked about just yet. What I really liked was that graph in the beginning, that bar chart, where he showed the relationship between the total population, the working age population, and the labor force. So you could see how they're related to each other. You know, he's showing how the entire population is the tall red bar. Then you subtract out the people who are potentially eligible for work, meaning between let's say 16 and up, and then you remove the people who don't want to work, and because they're doing something else, and so what's left is the labor force, and then it's from the labor force that we get our unemployment numbers. So he also discussed different types of unemployment, which we'll be talking about as well. But so this was clearly made fairly recently while the pandemic was still roaring ahead. And yes, if you saw that chart, you could see that the economy had been booming, just absolutely booming before the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, pow, we're hit with double-digit unemployment. Luckily, that's settling down now, but the economy really took a hit from the COVID, which really is very unfortunate because it just imposes a lot of pain and misery on a lot of people. But fortunately, it appears that that's coming to an end, but it still caused a lot of problems. So anyway, let's look at the next one, where we are looking at defining, they're going to spend more time telling you, oh yes, Fernando.
In the video, he mentioned like there was like a formula for like the unemployment, and I wanted to
Yes.
ask, where did he get that from? Like,
Oh, we're going to look at that here too. In fact, we have 6 formulas that we're going to look at. I mentioned last time that there are officially 6 different unemployment calculations that we could potentially use. And so we're going to look at all 6 of them. And then I'll show you which one is considered to be the quote official unemployment calculation. But yes, don't you worry, we'll get to that really soon. In the slides, I mean. So first, let's watch the second one, and they'll get into more detail about how the unemployment rate is actually calculated, and then we'll look at the slides and go through it again. All right, hold on. Here we go. So let me send that out. And again, these people also do very good work. The MR University, these are professors at George Mason University in Virginia, and they always do very good work with their videos. So here you go. Let's check this out.
Let's begin today by taking a look at the unemployment rate in the United States. If we Google unemployment rate, United States, Fred, we'll get this graph from the St. Louis Federal Reserve Economic Database. We can see from the graph that the unemployment rate fluctuates. Since 1950, it's averaged about 6% per year, but it dipped below 3% once, and it hit highs of 10.8% in December of 1982, and almost as high, 10%, in October of 2009, the Great Recession. Not surprisingly, the unemployment rate increases during recessions, and those are shown by the shaded areas. Perhaps a little bit more surprisingly, the unemployment rate is never zero, not even in a boom. In a growing economy, lots of things are changing. And even as some firms are expanding, others are shutting down. Workers, they're moving about, they're entering the workforce, they're looking for new jobs and so forth. We'll talk more about that in an upcoming video. Now let's look at how unemployment is defined. A person with a job is employed, but in the official definition, Not everyone without a job is unemployed. Is a 6-year-old unemployed? Is a prisoner unemployed? What about a retiree? In each of these cases, the official answer is no. A person is counted as unemployed only if they're an adult, non-institutionalized civilian without a job and actively looking for work. The most important part of this definition is that to be considered unemployed, a person must be out of a job but actively looking for work. And that means that they must have taken some action to find a job in the last 4 weeks. The unemployment rate is the number of people who are unemployed divided by the number of people in the civilian labor force, the employed plus the unemployed. Let's add the civilian labor force and the number of unemployed people to our graph to see all of these relationships and get an idea of the magnitudes. We can see, for example, that in February of 2015, there were 157 million people in the labor force. Of these, 5.5% were unemployed, which means that there were 8.6 million unemployed people. Now, in case you don't want to check those calculations, let's make it easy. Let's go to January of 1978. At that time, there were about 100 million people in the labor force. The unemployment rate was 6.4%, and there were 6.4 million people unemployed, just as expected. In the next video, we're going to look at a common criticism of the unemployment rate. Is unemployment undercounted? Is there a conspiracy to undercount the unemployment rate?
If you want to test yourself, click Practice Questions. Or if you're ready to move on, you can click Go to the next video. You can also visit mruniversity.com to see our entire library of videos and resources.
All right, everyone's done. All right, well, I didn't actually realize that this video was available. So it sounds like we should probably just watch this one as well. Let me just make a copy of this so that I can have a record of this for the future. You know, this happens to me all the time. I'm constantly finding excellent new videos on the internet for my different courses. And whenever I find a new one, I'm very excited because, you know, this is one of the best ways to learn this material, especially with the graphs. I mean, the graphs really make it work. So cyclical unemployment, before we start, basically refers to unemployment that is due to the state of the business cycle. And that's the one that policymakers are the most worried about, because this is something that they have, at least in principle, some control over. Because it's possible, for example, when the economy is sluggish, to do something about it, to try, for example, to spend more money or to lower interest rates or something along those lines. So this is the one that policymakers are worried about. The other two, which you mentioned in the previous video, structural and frictional, which we'll discuss in our notes, are the two that policymakers have no real control over. So as long as this video is here, we might as well check it out. So yes, because it's just, yeah, you know, these guys do a very good job. Marginal Revolution University, they call it. So, all right, so here we go. Let me send this off to you in the chat room, and we'll learn more about cyclical unemployment. All right.
Today, we're going to look at cyclical unemployment. Unemployment correlated with the ups and downs of the business cycle. Using our friend, the Fred database, it's easy to see that unemployment increases during a recession when the economy is shrinking or growing only very slowly. Indeed, low growth and high unemployment, that's part of what define a recession. Lower growth is usually accompanied by high unemployment for two reasons. First, and most obviously, when GDP is falling or growing more slowly than expected, firms often lay off workers, which generates unemployment. The second reason is slightly more subtle. Higher unemployment means that fewer workers are producing goods and services. And when workers are sitting idle, it's likely that capital is also sitting idle. And an economy with idle labor and capital, well, it can't be maximizing growth. Although unemployment is clearly correlated with the business cycle, the exact reasons why are debated by economists. To see some of the issues, notice, for example, that unemployment typically spikes quickly when growth declines, but then it returns to more normal levels only slowly. The unemployment rate spiked in 2008, for example, as the economy declined. By 2010, the economy was actually growing at a slow but steady rate of around 2% per year. But unemployment didn't return to pre-recession levels for another 5 years. Why did it take so long for the unemployment rate to return to more normal levels? Think about a typical market, say the market for apples. Unemployed apples in this case would be apples that aren't being bought. Now, in a situation with high apple unemployment, you'd have a higher quantity supplied than the quantity demanded at the current price. So what would you expect to happen in this situation? Well, ordinarily, the price of apples would drop until the quantity supplied of apples equaled the quantity demanded and the market cleared. However, people are more complicated than apples, and labor markets, they don't seem to behave in quite this way. Even when there are lots of unemployed workers, that is a higher quantity supplied of workers than the quantity demanded, wages seem to fall more slowly than you would expect. Economists say that wages are sticky. Sticky wages reduce the incentives to hire more workers, and they slow the adjustment process. Now, sticky wages are puzzling, and economists have a number of theories for why wages might be sticky. Probably the most important reason is that human beings get very upset when their wages fall, especially if the fall in wages is obvious and appears to be caused by a person easily identifiable, like an employer. Imagine that your employer cut your wages. You'd probably be pretty upset. You might even retaliate by working less hard or even by disrupting your workplace. Because of the fear of reducing morale, employers are very reluctant to reduce nominal wages. This graph, for example, shows the distribution of non-zero wage changes. Small increases in wages are common, but small decreases in wages are very rare. Now, even in a growing economy, we'd expect to see wages to fluctuate, like other prices, with lots of small wage decreases as well as wage increases. Supply and demand are constantly changing. But that's not what we see. Wages go up much more often than they go down. If nominal wages are sticky in the downward direction, it's going to take a long time to adjust to a shock that requires wages to fall, especially if the inflation rate is low, a point which we will return to in a later video. Unemployed workers may also take time to learn or to accept that their wages have fallen. And workers may also be afraid to accept a low-quality job for fear of being branded a low-quality worker. If you're a computer programmer, you might not want to take a job at Starbucks, even if you could get one, or at least you might not want to put it on your resume. So workers may want to search for a long time before they take a new job. Minimum wages in union contracts can also slow the adjustment of wages, as they put legal or contractual limits on how low wages can go. All of these mechanisms can lengthen the amount of time that it takes for unemployed workers to be rehired. Okay, one final concept, the natural rate of unemployment. The natural rate is defined as the rate of unemployment that would occur if there were no cyclical unemployment. In other words, it's the rate of frictional plus structural unemployment. Now, why do we care about the natural rate? We care because economists think that under some conditions, the government can reduce cyclical unemployment through fiscal and monetary policies. Things like spending more money, cutting taxes, or increasing the money supply. These policies, however, are unlikely to change frictional or structural unemployment. So when the unemployment rate is close to the natural rate, that suggests that the scope for monetary and fiscal policy is diminished. Now, unfortunately, we can only estimate the natural rate of unemployment. It's not something that we observe. This figure shows one estimate of the natural rate alongside the actual unemployment rate. Notice that by 2015, the actual unemployment rate was close to the natural rate. So by this estimate, the time for fiscal and monetary policy had passed. Other estimates of the natural rate might suggest more room for policy. Clearly, theories of cyclical unemployment are closely tied to theories of the business cycle. Why does an economy have booms and busts? And to theories about how the government might use fiscal and monetary policy to smooth the business cycle. So we will be revisiting all of these issues in future videos.
If you want to test yourself, click practice questions. Or if you're ready to move on, you can click go to the next video. You can also visit mruniversity.com to see our entire library of videos and resources.
All right, I guess we're all done watching that. So guess what? There's another one here. So this one is entitled Structural Unemployment. So now we didn't quite get to that point in the slides yet. So, but I just want to verbally tell you right now, structural unemployment refers to people who do not have a job, not because of the state of the economy, but because they either have a very poor skill set, or possibly they do not speak English, or maybe they, I don't know, for some reason there are other issues involved that make it difficult for them to work. But in other words, their lack of a job is not because of the economy, but because they don't have enough skills to find a job, or else there are other issues involved. You know, like there could be people who just, you know, don't work well with other people, you know, you get things like that. But as long as the problem is that the person doesn't have the right training or background or aptitude to work, then we call it structural unemployment. And of course, the problem is that the person needs more training. And that's not going to come from monetary or fiscal policy. So why don't we check this one out too, as long as we're on the topic. I'll just send you the link. And let's check this out. All right, this should be good.
Structural unemployment is persistent long-term unemployment. Isn't it redundant to say that unemployment is persistent and long-term? Not quite. What we have in mind is when a large share of the unemployed have been unemployed for a long time, and this has been true for many years. Consider the following data from some leading European economies and the United States. In each case, the average unemployment rate in the European economies between 1980 and 2004 was higher than in the United States, sometimes markedly so. In Italy and France, unemployment rates have hovered around 10% for several decades, while Spain has had long spans of unemployment near 20%. Now look at the fraction of the unemployed who are unemployed for more than a year. In most of these economies, between 40 to 50% of the unemployed were long-term unemployed, compared to the United States at just 12.7%. In the United States, the fraction of the unemployed who were long-term, it did shoot up in the 2008-2009 recession, but it's since fallen. This persistent long-term unemployment is structural unemployment. One of the causes of structural unemployment is large, quick-hitting, and relatively permanent shocks that change the number, location, and types of jobs. The 1970s oil shocks, the opening of trade with China in the 1990s, or the rapid rise of the internet would all be examples. It can take time to adjust to these kinds of big changes in the economy. These shocks, however, they've hit both the United States and Europe. So why is structural unemployment a worse problem in Europe? The most likely answer is that European labor regulations have increased structural unemployment, in part by making it more difficult to respond to shocks. In the United States, for example, the most basic employment law is the at-will doctrine, which says that an employee can quit and an employer can fire at any time and for any reason. Now, there are many exceptions to the law. Employers cannot fire due to race, religion, and sex, for example. And at-will employment can be changed by contract. Nevertheless, at-will employment remains the default US employment law. The situation in Europe, in contrast, is often very different. In Portugal, for example, the constitution makes at-will employment illegal. Dismissing a worker instead requires just cause. Now, that may seem like a good thing. Who could object to just cause? But in practice, what this means is that dismissing a worker in Portugal requires a complex and often lengthy process that requires union and government approval. Because it's difficult to fire workers in these countries, employers are also reluctant to hire. Imagine how hard it would be to get a date if every date required marriage. In the same way, it's more difficult to get a job when every job requires a long-term commitment from the employer. Let's look at some data at how these labor market regulations affect unemployment. On the horizontal axis, we'll put the rigidity of employment index, which the World Bank calculates to summarize hiring and firing costs and how easy it is for a firm to adjust hours of work. On the vertical axis, we have the percentage of the unemployed that are unemployed for long periods of time. You can see a clear trend. The share of long-term unemployment increases with greater labor market rigidity. European labor law also differs from American law in another respect. European unemployment benefits are typically much more generous than American benefits. In the United States, for example, unemployment insurance might pay, say, 30% of what a worker was earning in their job. It's not that much. In Sweden, Portugal, or Spain, a typical worker would get at least twice that much. Now, a worker who is being paid only 30% of his or her previous wage, they're going to be much more eager to find a new job than a worker who is being paid 60% of their previous wage. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it gives workers time to find better jobs. But it does mean that unemployment rates tend to be higher and are longer lasting in Europe than in the United States. The European economies, because of these issues, they've been trying to move towards more flexible labor markets since the 1990s. But the process is slow and difficult. We can illustrate why with a tale of two riots. In November of 2005, angry, predominantly immigrant minority youth rioted in Paris. The riots were triggered by accusations of police brutality, but they also reflected underlying problems in the labor market, most especially that 30% of the immigrant youth were unemployed. French firms were reluctant to hire young minority workers, perhaps in some cases because of outright discrimination, but also because young workers are especially risky. Labor law made it difficult to fire, and so firms were reluctant to hire. Once again, who wants to go out on a blind date if a date means forever? Now, the French government was aware of these problems, and they proposed to change labor law so that employment would be at will, but just for workers under the age of 26. Such a law would have been good for immigrant youth, but the idea that they might be fired at will, that offended more elite French students. So these elite students, well, they started riots of their own. They took over university offices. They shut down universities all across France. And they were joined by hundreds of thousands of people who protested the proposed law. There were numerous clashes between the police and the protesters. The government backed down. The tale of two riots illustrates how restrictive labor law can create two very different groups. The insiders, who for the most part enjoy the protection of long-term stable employment, and the outsiders, the people who are frozen out of the regular labor market. They end up having high unemployment rates and only intermittent and temporary employment. Dealing with structural unemployment and creating a labor market that's open to all workers. This is one of the most serious issues facing some of the economies in the European Union. Okay, in our next video, we're going to turn to another type of unemployment, cyclical unemployment.
If you want to test yourself, click practice questions. Or if you're ready to move on, you can click go to the next video.
Okay, I think you'll agree. Oh, wait a minute, there is one more. They have frictional here. All right, let's watch frictional unemployment. That's the last of the three types. We've already seen cyclical, which is due to the business cycle, structural, which is not due to the business cycle. They were focusing more on the labor laws, but structural unemployment includes basically anyone who's been unemployed for long periods of time. It could be for a lot of reasons. It could be because of, like they said, rigid labor laws, but it could also be because people themselves, possibly their jobs have become obsolete and they need to be retrained in something else, or possibly they just don't have, the skills. Like, imagine people who've dropped out of high school, they're going to find it very difficult to find a job. And so they could be considered structurally unemployed because they don't have enough education or experience. So anything that causes people to be out of work for long periods of time, other than due to the economy, could be defined as structural unemployment. But there's a third type called frictional. And frictional is one of those things where labor markets are not perfect. It takes time to find a job, and that's just the reality. But while you're looking, you could be considered frictionally unemployed because you may have the right skills, you just haven't found the right job yet. And that can take a while, especially when the economy's slowing down. This is the kind of thing that we'll never completely get rid of because labor markets aren't perfectly efficient. But yet at the same time, though, this is not something that would respond well to changes in interest rates or inflation or whatever. So we'll look at this one. This will be the last of the three forms of unemployment. Let me send this over to you. And then I guess we can get back to the slides. Here we go. All right.
Frictional unemployment is short-term unemployment caused by the ordinary difficulties of matching employee to employer. The moment a student graduates, for example, and starts to look for work, they're officially unemployed. After a few weeks of applications and interviews, the student might be offered a job, but perhaps the pay is too low or the location, not quite what the student wanted. The student remains unemployed. Only after a few weeks more does the student find and accept a job and officially exit unemployment and enter employment. The student's period of unemployment, that's frictional unemployment. Now, frictional unemployment, it's ever present because the US economy is very dynamic. To see this dynamism, let's take a closer look at some of the job statistics. We often hear on the news that say 200,000 new jobs were created or lost this month. Here's a graph of net employment changes. You can see the big recession in 2008, 2009, when in the worst months, as many as 800,000 jobs were being lost. Since the end of 2010, you can also see the recovery, where there have been a little more than about 200,000 jobs created every month. Now, these figures, they are useful, but it's important to understand that they're net changes. When the news reports that 200,000 new jobs were created this month, what actually happened is that there were around 4.5 million new hires and 4.3 million new separations, that is quits or layoffs. So the net number, it hides the vast amount of job change, which is actually happening behind the scenes. Every month, millions of people quit their jobs, sometimes to get a new job, sometimes to go back to school, sometimes to retire. Other people start new jobs after graduating or finding new opportunities. This all causes frictional unemployment, and it's a normal part of a dynamic economy. Now, sometimes changing jobs isn't by choice. People lose their jobs due to a firm going bankrupt, downsizing, or moving locations. But that can also be part of a healthy economy. When firms compete, some will naturally do better than others at delivering the products and the services that consumers actually want. We used to fly Pan Am, eat at Bob's Big Boy, and choose our top 10 friends on MySpace. These firms, however, they've disappeared, while others, such as Southwest Airlines, Shake Shack, and Facebook, have grown. It's easy to see these big changes. Less obvious are the smaller changes that occur every day. But all of these changes are important because they move resources across the economy from where those resources have low value to where the resources have high value. So short-term, frictional unemployment, it's inherent in a growing and changing economy. And overall, it's a small price to pay for growth and change. More serious, however, are the two other types of unemployment: structural unemployment and cyclical unemployment. That's what we'll turn to next.
If you want to test yourself, click Practice Questions. Or if you're ready to move on, you can click Go to the next video. You can also visit mruniversity.com to see our entire library of videos and resources.
Well, I have a feeling that we went out of order here. It seems like every time they showed us or told us there's a new video, it was referring to the one we just watched. But that's all right. With those three, the order isn't really relevant as long as we understand all three basic types. So, but what we're going to do now is go back to chapter 6. What we wanted to do is visit the official definitions of unemployment. And like I said, there are altogether 6 of them. And then we'll get back to our discussion about the different types of unemployment. All right, so let's see. Let's get this open. Let's see, chapter 6. Oh, one more thing. You know what I did find here? I almost forgot about it. I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website a while back. I guess this was in the spring. And I downloaded the data that they make available to you for free, just so you can get a look at what it looks like and see what kinds of information they have. So I just chose this one. I know you can see this only goes back to January. And so they organize it very, very well. You can see it's organized by months, and you can see how much the unemployment rate changes from one month to the next. And if you look down here, just before the COVID, right about here, we're down to 3.5%, which is very, very low by historical standards. As I mentioned in the video, the natural rate of unemployment, which basically means that is as far as we can get when we've eliminated all cyclical unemployment. What's left is structural and frictional. So you can see it was down to 3.5%. And then all of a sudden, well, there we go. Here comes the COVID, and it's up, and then it starts to come down. And so in January, it was down to about 6.3%, which is actually more normal. In the long run in the US, typically unemployment had been around 5% up to 6%. So we're getting back into more normal territory, but you can see things were really looking good in February of 2020. But sadly enough, the COVID ruined all that. So, all right, anyway, so I just wanted you to see this data. And now we can get back to the slides. And, oh, whoops, I already have it open. All right, so yes, all this data is readily available on BLS.gov. That's the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's all available for free, and they'll break it down into much more detail, not just the total numbers. Anything you can possibly want to know is in here somewhere. There are articles in here, like it says here, data tools, popular series. I mean, you know, they've got so much good stuff here. And you can pick whatever you want. For example, unemployment rate. Let's see now retrieve data. Look how easy this is. And there it is. So yeah, so remember I said I did that in January. Now in the meantime, let's look at how it's gone, 6.2, and it's slowly creeping down. And in August, it was down to 5.2. And if you want a copy of this, just hit download XLSX. In fact, I'll do that right now. And I'll post it up on Moodle. So you can see the latest version, if you want to. I don't know how far back they'll let you go. This one only went back to 2011. I suspect that you could ask for more data if you really want it. Like, oh, there it is, no wonder. Because all right, let's see, let's go back a ways. Oh, it even includes graphs and averages. Oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah, this is the COVID. Yeah, look at that. That spike tells it all. So, and then these are the numbers, right? If you really wanted to look at them, and you can see that prior to, let's say 2000 and this area, you see up here, if you look even through 2016 and before, these numbers are all in the 6s and 5s. It used to be normal for the unemployment rate to be around 5 or maybe more, but so this period that we're getting into was really not exactly unprecedented. It was pretty strong. So hopefully we'll get back to that really soon. But anyway, you can play around with this all you want, it looks like, and get any information you want. Man, look at all this good stuff. Price indexes. Let's say you want to look at, now this is the next chapter, by the way, inflation. So when we start talking about inflation, we'll come back here and we'll download some of this data to see what the inflation rate has looked like in the US in recent years. And, until actually this year, it's starting to heat up again, but until recently, it was normal for inflation in the US to be about 2% per year. But there were periods in the past where it was quite a bit higher than that as well. And they'll show you how to break it down into different categories. All kinds of fun stuff is here. And it's free. It's all free. All right. The logic being that the taxpayers already paid for this, therefore you can have it for free. All right. So anyway, let's go back to the slides. All right. Let's see why that's not letting me do that. So we've already basically covered some of these ideas. We explained, for example, what the labor force is. And this thing is really being stubborn today. I don't know what's going on. It's like responding to like half of my mouse clicks at most. It's just sitting there staring at me. Yeah, computers get like this every so often. No, it's just frozen up. Won't even let me close it out. I don't know what that's all about. All right, you know what I'm going to do? Let me close out some of these files. Yeah, it's just frozen. It's not like I've got a million windows open here, and sometimes that's what. Oh no, there it goes. I don't know what that was all about. All right, but sometimes with computers, if you have too much stuff open, no, there it goes again. It won't move. Well, I have to admit, this is a cheap little computer. I think it needs to be replaced. Nope, it won't let me do anything. Let me see if I can open it off of my my stick here, my flash drive. Oops. All right, so this one is working. All right, we can stick with this one. The other one will disappear when I turn the computer off. So anyway, so the BLS gathers this information through the so-called current population survey. And what are they trying to do? They want to find out what our employment status is. Like, do you have a job? If you're not employed, are you looking for a job? So these are important details because we need to know who's in the labor force, who's in the working age population. And those are going to help us figure out the unemployment rate. So let's see. So yeah, as I mentioned in the video, to be considered unemployed, you must not obviously have a job now, but you have to have actively looked for work during the last 4 weeks. And of course, there's a lot of gray area there, but I guess as long as you're sending out resumes, you're calling, when you're looking around, that would be considered looking for work. And of course, it must be true too, that if somebody did offer you a job, you'd be in a position to accept it. As I mentioned in the video, people who are in jail are not available for work, so they're not considered to be part of the working age population, and neither are the military because obviously they're busy doing something else. They also, it's funny too, if you notice when they were talking about this in the video, instead of calling them prisoners, they called them institutionalized. All right, I guess that's a nicer word for being in jail. But anyway, so we're only trying to capture people who are looking for work. And there's a lot of ways this can happen, especially now in this day and age. You can do a lot of this online. There are websites like monster.com where you can search for jobs. If you've never heard of this before, let me just show it to you. And it's a very, unless it's become obsolete, you never know. Monster.com is a website where you can look for jobs and you can apply for jobs. Okay. And so if you're saying, I want to work in accounting, Well, you go in here and you look for accounting openings in your area. And if you find one you like, you can pop your resume in there. And apparently this is a very efficient website, and a lot of employers use this. So when you're ready to graduate, you might want to think about using monster.com, because it's all done online, and that's what people expect these days. I mean, you can mail resumes to companies, but there's a very real chance that they won't get read. So this is really, I guess, the wave of the future. But if you're using these tools, then you would be considered looking for work. Okay. And also they'll help you get your resume into better shape too. They have all kinds of services, because I've used this myself, although it was a long time ago. And wow, and then they're really, they've got a lot of everything here, don't they? I'm very impressed. But anyway, so yeah, this would mean you're unemployed. If you're now in some industries, I think we mentioned this, there's certain industries where the work is very erratic, and sometimes they go through layoff periods where they're not busy, so they just send everybody home and then they call them back when they need them. That happens too, but those people are considered to be unemployed because it's not their fault that they were laid off. The working age population are the people who theoretically could be in the labor force if they choose to do that. And we mentioned this before, 16 years or older, not institutionalized, not in the armed forces, and of course not hospitalized either. Now, everybody who's in the working age population is either in the labor force or they're not. And here the distinction seems to be just, are you available for work or not? Okay, if so, you're in the labor force. If you would not accept a job, even if it came along, then you're not in the labor force. Okay, so like people who, like they said in the video, have given up. And you get that sometimes. People will say, I'm having so much trouble getting work. Maybe I'll just take some time off and do something else. Or what some people do is they choose that time to go back to school. And then, of course, they're no longer in the labor force because they're in school again. In fact, in graduate programs, they find that enrollments tend to go up a lot when the economy is in bad shape, because a lot of people will use that opportunity to pursue graduate degrees because they're unemployed, so now they have plenty of time on their hands, or else get training of some kind. Now, and of course, the labor force are the people who either have jobs or are looking for a job. And the unemployment rate now is formally defined as the number unemployed out of the total labor force, not the working age population, not the overall population, but the labor force. The challenging part is here. Well, actually the labor force to a certain degree as well, but what do we mean by unemployed? Now, we know that there's a lot of potential gray area there. So that's why we have to have different measures of unemployment. So let's jump ahead a little bit here. And just quickly, in addition to the unemployment rate, sometimes you see these two numbers as well, the so-called employment to population ratio, which is the proportion of the working age population that's working, which is typically in the 60s, although that can change. So like here, if we have a labor force of 160 million people, 8 of which are unemployed, altogether, and assuming that the working age population is 250, that means the proportion of the working age population that is actually working is 152 out of 250, or 60.8%. I don't think this one is quite as useful, but you also see this one thrown around a lot, the labor force participation rate. This one can be very controversial because when the economy is unusually bad and a lot of people give up looking for work, the labor force participation rate actually shrinks, and then the unemployment rate can actually go down even if the economy isn't doing well. And so sometimes the unemployment rate itself, you have to take it with a grain of salt. You have to ask yourself, is this unemployment rate going down because more people are working? Or is it just because more people dropped out of the workforce or the labor force? And that's not good. All right, if that's the cause, then the lower unemployment rate is actually very deceiving. And yeah, there have been times in the past where this is exactly what was happening. The unemployment rate was going down even while people were losing their jobs because so many people dropped out of the labor force. But anyway, this number is typically in the 60s. Roughly 60%, 64, 65% of the working age population is actively working or looking for work. Now, so here's the thing about the unemployment rate. The issue here is, what do you do about these people? Discouraged workers, people who have essentially given up looking for work because they're so discouraged, marginally attached, which we'll define in a minute, and like they mentioned in the videos, part-time workers who are seeking full-time work. Okay, are they unemployed or not? Well, discouraged is somebody who does not have a job, would ideally like to have one, but has not looked for work in the last 4 weeks. Although, if they've looked for work in the last 12 months, they still can be qualified as a discouraged worker because they haven't completely given up. If you've been out of work more than a year and you're not looking, then you're not, it's not likely you'd accept a job that comes along. But apparently they've decided that up to 12 months is still good enough to be considered discouraged, but you're not officially in the unemployment, counted as unemployed. So what do we do with this? Should we count them or not? Well, the official unemployment rate does not, but there are other alternative measures that do. Now, the marginally attached workers are all the discouraged workers plus people who have dropped out of the labor force for reasons other than being unable to look for work or unable to find a job. Okay, there could be other reasons going on too that prevent people from working. And so we call these marginally attached. And then we have, full-time, part-time. It doesn't seem to be complete agreement about what do we mean by full-time. In some places it's defined as 40 hours, in some places it's defined as 35. But like I said in the video, a person who had been working 35 or 40 hours and who has their hours cut back is technically still employed, even though they would like to work more hours. So what do you do with these people? Should they be counted as employed or unemployed? It's hard to say. So because of all these people who don't really neatly fit into any category, the Bureau of Labor Statistics actually has 6 unemployment measures. Some of them are very narrow and some of them are very broad. For example, the number that you see thrown around in the media is called U3, the third unemployment measure. And it's the one you hear about all the time. And it's the one we've been talking about, total unemployed over the size of the labor force. But there are others too. There's also U1, U2, U3, U4, U5, and U6. And what happens is U1 is very tightly defined. There's hardly anybody who really qualifies as unemployed. And then at the other extreme is U6, where almost everybody who's not working is counted as unemployed. So for example, let's look at U4. Here you've added the discouraged workers to both the unemployed and the labor force. And that has a tendency to increase this number above U3. In fact, you know what? I'm wondering if we could go find on the BLS website what the current numbers are for these definitions. Let's take a look for a second. All right, well, this is a chart. I would have rather seen a table. Oh, here it is, here it is. No, well, this table is actually helpful because it shows you what's getting counted and what's not getting counted. But I was hoping we could have a table. All right, well, we'll have to live with this chart. But you can see, this is U1, U2. Oh, that's U3, okay. There's U4, U5, and U6. What happened to U2? There it is. Okay. They're right sitting on top of each other. No wonder. So the bottom line is U1 has the lowest unemployment rate. Yes, Fernando?
Sorry, but U1 all the way up to U4 and 5 and 6, I believe, is like different categories of the unemployment.
Right, exactly. What it does is it includes different groups of people in the official unemployment who are officially unemployed. What's changing is the definition, and potentially both are changing, the definition of the labor force and the definition of what it means to be unemployed. So in U1, this is the most narrow definition of unemployed. If you don't, let's see, I have it in here somewhere. Let me look. Here it is. In order to be counted as unemployed, you have to be unemployed for 15 weeks or more. And we divide that by the labor force. This includes nobody else. So it's a very narrow definition. And so because of that, it's very low. Let's go to the other extreme, U6. U6, oh, where is it? Well, you can see with U6, we're basically including almost everybody. We have the unemployed, the discouraged workers, the marginally attached, and the involuntary part-time workers. They've been added to both the unemployment, or those who are counted as unemployed, as well as the labor force. And by doing this, the U6 measure is typically much higher than the others, because this basically includes everyone. All right, everyone who's even potentially interested in working is counted here. And so that's this one. You can see right now it's around 10.4, whereas the official rate, U3, is around 6.1. And then way down here at the bottom, U1 is only 3.5%. But that's because they're leaving out an awful lot of people who are sort of not really working, but they're in sort of a gray area. So basically, U1 takes out everyone, like everybody who's not in one of those very rigid categories, and U6 includes almost everybody. And then you have everything in between. So the idea is that you can pick which one you think is the most realistic, but the one that is considered to be the quote official rate is U3. That's the one that's we pay the most attention to. But these others exist, and policymakers do look at them, but for all practical purposes, when you hear the words unemployment rate being reported, they're talking about U3. Now, I don't know the reasons why U3 is considered to be the official rate. Maybe it's on their website, but this is the one that they use. But they do have these others because they recognize that these measures are all a little iffy. Let's just say all of them should be taken with a grain of salt. You've got all these different people who potentially could be included or not included in the labor force or the unemployment rate. So they get around this problem by just saying, well, let's have a bunch of measures where, like, for example, U4, we add the discouraged workers. U5, we add on top of that the marginally attached workers. And then U6, we add the involuntary part-time workers. So now you've essentially captured everyone. And because of that, the unemployment rate appears to be very, very high when, maybe some of these people really aren't looking for work. So, you can see, unlike most other economic measures that we'll encounter, there's a lot of controversy with the unemployment rate. It's probably the least well-defined of all the measures that we'll study. And again, it's because there's so many situations people could find themselves in where they might or might not be counted as unemployed. Especially with a bizarre case like the COVID. I mean, what do you do now? Like, what about people who only lost their jobs because of COVID? You see all the problems that they're being presented with. So the thinking is that if we just keep always looking at U3, at least, we've got some standard for comparison with past years to see how the unemployment rate is going. But they're all out there. If you want to look up the data. Oh, here it is. I did put a chart together for the first quarter of 2018, and this is pretty normal. This would be the official rate. But you can see as you go up, they go up and up and up because you're including more and more people. But down here, we have less unemployment because we're including less people. All right, now this is what our videos were talking about that we hadn't quite gotten to yet. The three basic types, which we kind of understand already. Let's quickly review these. Frictional means you're temporarily between jobs, but it's expected that you will find one very soon. And all newly graduated students fall into this category. Okay, and because it takes a while to get that first job. But even, if you've been in the workforce for a while, if you find yourself looking for a better job, and let's say you quit and you decide to look for a better job, that would mean frictional unemployment because you're only temporarily in between positions. Structural means people have been unemployed for a long time, and it's partially because of poor job skills, or maybe your skills have become obsolete. You're working in an industry where trade has made your job unnecessary or redundant, or technology. In a lot of cases, jobs disappear because of advancing technology. Like in the fast food business, that they're improving the technology very quickly. So like you can now find McDonald's where they have these computer screens where you can order your food, which means you don't have to talk to a person. And that means less people will be working in that McDonald's. And so those people will find that their positions it's going to be harder to get another new job if all the fast food restaurants do the same thing. So they unfortunately have to go out and maybe find new training or something else to do. And then cyclical means they've lost their jobs due to the business cycle. Okay, a recession comes along and people get laid off. And so as we saw in the videos, monetary and fiscal policy, which we will discuss in later chapters, can be used to help these people. The government can stimulate the economy by, for example, lowering interest rates with monetary policy. They can also cut taxes or spend more money with fiscal policy to help stimulate the economy and reduce or eliminate this cyclical unemployment. And if they do, we're said to have reached the natural rate of unemployment. Okay. Now, there's nothing policymakers can do about frictional unemployment because labor markets are not perfect. Structural requires training. Okay. If you dropped out of high school and you don't speak English, you might not ever get a job unless you get more training. It has nothing to do with the economy. And then the natural rate is, like I said, the rate we would reach if we finally eliminated all cyclical unemployment. And that is also defined as full employment. So like when we were looking at that chart before where unemployment hit 3.5% in February of 2020, it may very well be that we were at full employment. Okay, that was it. The rest of the unemployment was due to frictional or structural unemployment. And that may very well be the case. Not now, of course. And the level of GDP that we can reach at that point is called potential GDP because this is the best we can do with the resources that we have. And then finally, one more phrase here that you might have seen before. The output gap is the difference between what the GDP actually is and the so-called potential GDP. So in other words, if you can imagine, what is our GDP now versus what it could have been if we had full employment? That's referred to as the output gap, and we hope to keep that as low as possible, as you can imagine. The difference between what we could have had and what we do have. And this gap, of course, increases during a recession, and it slows down or shrinks during a recovery. And this is one way you can tell how strong the economy is by how low the output gap is. Oh, all right. Well, here's a quick example. If we're actually experiencing $14 trillion in GDP, but we estimate that the potential is 15 trillion, then the gap is $1 trillion. And that indicates that we have some cyclical unemployment. Okay. All right. But on the other hand, if we're above where we could be now, how is this possible? Actual is actually here higher than potential. sometimes the economy gets really, really insanely active, and the economy can just crank along and churn out a lot of goods and services in a short period of time when all our resources are being used to their absolute maximum capacity. That would mean, for example, a lot of people are working overtime and running factories round the clock and that type of thing. This can happen for short periods of time. And it doesn't typically last for long, but it does occasionally happen. The problem with this is that if it lasts for too long, the economy starts to experience increasing inflation. So we don't really want this either, although it's fun when while it lasts. But ideally, you'd want the economy to be exactly at potential GDP, no more, because that could stimulate inflation, but no less, because that could stimulate unemployment. So in that case, cyclical unemployment could technically be negative. Well, it sounds hard to believe, but it can happen for short periods of time, and it has happened. So now the natural rate, this is another controversial area. The natural rate of unemployment for the longest time was assumed to be 5%. But then in the last couple of years before the COVID, all of a sudden we found the unemployment rate dropping to 3.5%. So that meant that something had changed. The economy was undergoing, changes largely due to advances in technology and productivity. And it's very possible that the natural rate itself can change over time. If the economy is more efficient, you'd expect this number to shrink, because that would indicate we have less structural unemployment and less frictional unemployment. Okay, so now who knows? We don't know what's going on again until everything returns to normal, but it may very well be that the natural rate is lower than we ever thought it was before. The economy is capable of having lower unemployment rates if things are going well. All right, now what actually affects this? Well, the age of the population, structural changes like technology advances. New technology replaces old technology, like they showed in the video, 3 big companies that no longer exist. Real wages, which means wages adjusted for inflation and unemployment, and they all change over time. So, all right, anyway, so that was chapter 6. Let me just remind myself, I think chapter 7 is inflation. Yes, it is. Okay, so that'll be interesting. But anyway, so at some point, now we've been having so much fun with this stuff that we've forgotten that we at some point have to have a test. Oh, one more thing. I think there's a problem set for chapter 6. Yes. Let's take a quick look at it. Yes, oh, okay. Well, a lot of it is definitional. Some of it is computational. So let's do this. Let's agree that next Tuesday, when we get back together again, we'll go over this chapter 6 problem set, and then we'll dive into the inflation discussion. But then what we're going to have to do is have what's called a sample midterm, which I think I have it right here. The sample midterm is basically a review of everything that you need to get ready for the first midterm. Oh, there it is. And so it's literally everything. Now, I believe this only goes up to chapter 4. Yes, it looks that way. Okay, so you know what that means then. So once we've finished that, which we'll do not on Tuesday, but maybe Friday, then what I can do is I can post the actual midterm on the internet, on the Moodle rather. And what you'll have to do is download it, print it out, write out all your answers on paper, type it if you can. And then what I've been doing with online classes is having people take pictures of their answers and emailing them back to me. So we'll do something like that. And so the advantage of this approach is that you'll have all your notes in front of you while you're working on this exam. And also I can give you plenty of time to do it. I usually give people a week to do online exams. So it'll be no longer than a normal exam, but you'll have the advantage of being at home, and you'll be able to look at your notes, and you'll have a week to do it. So it shouldn't be too difficult. It should be very straightforward, which is good, but So if you're not used to doing this online, I don't know how your other classes handle this, but I think this works very well for us. All right, given the kind of material that we're doing here, this works very well, I think. The only thing is you got to watch out because you'll have to draw some graphs. And so you will at some point have to be carefully when you take pictures of these answers you're giving me, just to make sure that they are legible. But we'll discuss all this next week. In the meantime, why don't we focus our attention on the chapter 6 problem set? And when that's done, we can take a peek at chapter 7. But then that Friday, I think we'll go over the sample midterm. Okay, we don't want to wait too long because then you'll start to forget what we did in the first few chapters. And I know we don't like to interrupt our learning with reviewing, but it has to be done. Okay, so I know you're dying to see what's coming next, but yeah, we want to get this out of the way as soon as possible, and then we can carry on and learn plenty of new, exciting concepts. All right, so I guess if there's no questions, I'll see you all on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Devin?
I did have a question about the chapter 5 problem set.
Yes.
We did the expenditure approach, right?
Yes, that was the expenditure approach. That's the one that's y equals c plus I
Yeah.
plus net exports.
I would just wanted to ask about the income approach. That's where you take the result from the expenditure approach and you minus the statistical discrepancy.
You could do that, yes. I'm trying to find it right now. Here it is. So what you're doing is using this equation. You're adding wages, interest, rent, profit, indirect taxes, less subsidies, all this stuff. Or like you said, if you already have the measure from the expenditures approach, the difference between them is the statistical discrepancy. But I won't ask you to do this in this class because it's just too messy. And I think it's enough to know that there's two different ways of doing this.
Oh, okay, yeah, because when I was doing it, I was
I would say that no, let's just, just be aware that this other approach exists, but for the most part, economists prefer the expenditures approach because it's easier to understand where it's coming from and to understand how these different factors are affected by interest rates and the dollar and all these other factors. So I would say that it's great that you know that there's an incomes approach and it should give us the same numbers, but it's just, to me, it's not worth the effort to learn it separately. I think we should focus on this one.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, Fernando?
Yeah. For I remember in the beginning of class, the beginning of this course, you mentioned that there's a textbook that we could refer to, and I wanted to ask that, knowing that there's these the slideshow notes and right or not, correct or not, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're like the same thing, like from the notes on the slideshows from the book.
Yes, I wrote them from the book. Yeah, I took all of them directly from the book. So that, yeah, if you're reading the book, you'll see more examples and more applications and all, but it's the same material because I did that on purpose to make sure that it lines up with the book.
Oh, okay. So then if we for us to study more on it with the problem sets,
the problem sets
or it wouldn't really matter, it would still help us.
The book is helpful too because it gives you, there's more information in there than we have in the slides. There's probably more examples in the book. There's probably more different material that we may not have had time for as well. It's more a big picture than what we're seeing here. We're just focusing on these topics, but if you read the book, you'll get a better sense of the background for this material and maybe see more of the connections with other parts of economics. But if you only have limited time, I would focus on the slides and the problem sets. But I also would encourage you to read the book as well, because it is a very good book.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Have a great day, Professor.
Oh, okay. You too.
Great weekend.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.